This is not one of those videos uncovering Easter eggs in a movie or 10 things you may have missed, although there are spoilers ahead. This is simply what I saw when I saw Saturday Night Fever. It only took me 41 years to finally watch Saturday Night Fever, the 1977 movie starring John Travolta, who, for his performance as Tony Manero, was nominated for the Academy Award for Best Actor. Now, as we all know, the film and soundtrack to Saturday Night Fever have become emblematic of the feel-good disco era 1970s. But the movie itself is surprisingly dark. And I loved it, not least because of a lot of small touches and details that I found fascinating. Some of them surely were intentional, others perhaps not. But I was so interested in how they played into character development and storytelling that I had to make this video. Let's start with the famous opening sequence of 19-year-old Tony Manero strutting through the streets of Brooklyn. He's young, he's sexy, he's handsome, but he also stands in front of women as they're trying to walk down the street, which makes Tony a bit of a heel. Why is this leather-clad stud carrying a can of paint? Well, he's taking it to the hardware store where he works. A customer had requested a color that wasn't in stock. The paint color is gold, appropriate since Tony is this story's golden boy. But the can of gold paint also prefigures the gold trophy that Tony competes for at the end of the movie. And in a detail that's easy to miss, I think, Tony tells his boss that he got the can for $7.98. Then he tells the customer, who by the way is played by John Travolta's mother, that he's going to give her a deal. He's going to knock $1 off and only charge her $10.98. Now that's the kind of salesperson you want on your staff. But because it's gold, it hints at an issue that we will encounter later. How much is the golden trophy really worth? Tony will devalue the trophy just as he knocks $1 off the cost of the can of paint, and so we get a small taste of the corruption inherent in so many people and things in this movie. The director, whose name is John Badham, makes sure that we get more than an eyeful of Tony's bedroom, especially his posters, the most prominent of which are of Rocky, Bruce Lee, Farrah Fawcett, and Al Pacino as Serpico. Serpico is there because the screenwriter for that movie, Norman Wexler, also wrote the screenplay for Saturday Night Fever. But the story of Serpico is of a New York police officer who rebels against corruption, which will also describe Tony. In time, Tony will see that his friends are morally bankrupt, phony bastards, he calls them, and that the judges at the disco can't be trusted to determine who's the best dancer. Tony's posters are mirrors reflecting back to him aspects of himself. Bruce Lee represents not only the poetry of physical movement, but also the fighter in Tony. And it's no accident, I think, that this poster image is taken from the Bruce Lee movie Enter the Dragon, which is also about a competition on an island. The Farrah Fawcett poster, an image of beauty, sexual arousal, and fabulous hair, is Tony's good looks. And of course, Rocky Balboa is, like Tony, an Italian stallion. All the poster images are of celebrities, bursting with charismatic power, like Tony, or how Tony likes to see himself. Tony surrounds the mirrored image of himself with celebrities as if they were religious icons, not unlike how Tony's mother puts the picture of her son Frank Jr., the priest, above everyone else in the family. Did you notice that none of the posters in Tony's room are of dancers? There are no images of Nureyev or Fred Astaire or Gene Kelly, perhaps because Tony doesn't see himself as a dancer, but just as a sexy, charismatic celebrity in his own little pond. Now, when we first get to know Tony, he seems to be doing okay in life. He's got a steady job where people like him, he's helping to support his family financially while his father is unemployed, And every weekend, Tony is the king of the disco. When Tony's boss tells him he's got to save money for his future, Tony replies, "Fuck the future." A punk rock sentiment if there ever was one. Punk rock, of course, was the musical response and backlash to disco. It's also funny that Tony would say "fuck the future" when the disco he goes to is named 2001 Odyssey, after the movie 2001 A Space Odyssey. That was the real name of a real club in Brooklyn, but it's fitting because ultimately, as Tony's boss warns him, the future fucks you. It's at the disco that we get a sign that all will not be well for our hero Tony. After a victorious lap around the dance floor, Doreen approaches Tony, asking if she could mop his sweaty brow. Now, any Catholic watching this movie will associate this young woman, Doreen, with Veronica, a woman who, according to Catholic tradition, but none of the four Gospels, wipes Jesus' face as he carries his cross to Golgotha. The face of Jesus is imprinted on Veronica's cloth as a mirror image. The idea of a mirror image recurs throughout this movie. Consider the mirror image of Tony and one of his poster icons, Rocky Balboa. When Tony is beat up by the Puerto Rican gang, he will get a cut under his left eye. On the poster in Tony's bedroom, Rocky has a cut under his right eye, a mirror image. Then Tony will get first prize, but not think he deserves it. Rocky doesn't get the decision, but he truly wins at the end of the movie. Now let's talk about the gang fight. In terms of the story, it has no relevance whatsoever to the main plot. It doesn't move the action forward. It doesn't jeopardize the main plot's outcome. It's not like Tony's legs get hurt fighting the gang, so he can't dance as well that night. We're told that Tony's friend Gus was attacked while he was bringing groceries home. Note that when Gus walks out of the grocery, the sign above him reads, "Stationary," a pun that describes nearly everyone in this movie, including Tony. They're stationary. They're going nowhere. They're not living life. They're just staying alive. Gus identifies his attackers as a gang of Puerto Rican kids called the Barracudas. Now, that is a long name to emblazon on the back of a jacket or to tattoo on your arm. A better, shorter name might be the Sharks, the gang of Puerto Rican kids in West Side Story who dance pretty well. The male romantic lead of West Side Story is also named Tony. Bay Ridge, where Tony lives, is on the west side of Brooklyn, and West Side Story is based on the play Romeo and Juliet, which Tony and Stephanie discuss in the diner. In this West Side Story, the Puerto Ricans lose to the Italian Americans, and notice how all the other dancing contestants have names, but it's just Couple 15, the Puerto Ricans. Tony knows that they danced better than him and Stephanie, so he gives them the trophy and the first place prize money of $500. Now in 2018, that's around $2,000. Money that Stephanie and especially Tony's family could have used. But Tony is hell-bent on devaluing what was once precious in his life. Small wonder, then, that in the next sequence, Tony tries to rape Stephanie. All the things to which Tony had assigned value, his friends, the disco, the contest, the word of the judges, have been revealed to be corrupt. The only currency Tony has left is his sexual potency, and even that is shown to have no value, at least as far as Stephanie is concerned. Now, if you've read trivia about Saturday Night Fever, you might know that the original color of Tony's suit at the end of the movie was to be black. But a black suit didn't photograph well under the disco lights. So, Tony wears white, which befits the hero of any story, except that Tony isn't entirely heroic. So, underneath the white suit is a black shirt. Remember that Tony's brother Frank leaves behind his priestly vestments, a black suit with a touch of white at the collar. Tony's vestments are a white suit with a touch of black at the collar. Again, a mirror image, a reflection. Now, does that make Tony a Christ figure? I wouldn't say that. But I did like how Tony, at dinner, appears to be wearing a white robe, which is what Catholic priests wear in their ordination ceremony. Tony wants to make sure he doesn't get food on his polyester shirt, so an ordinary napkin won't do. But it is while Tony is wearing this white robe that his mother says, "You should have been a priest like your brother. Not because you'd be closer to God," she says, "but because you'd have a steady job." And Tony's sister says, "You're so jealous of Frank Jr." Like a priest, Tony ends up having a chaste relationship with Stephanie. He agrees to be her friend, and as a reward, he gets a kiss on the cheek. Now, would Stephanie betray Tony with a kiss? Well, we'll have to wait for the sequel. Now, priestly or no, the white robe prefigures the white suit that Tony wears during the dance contest. Stephanie, too, is all in white at the end of the movie. Now, speaking of religious accoutrement, it's worth noting that before Tony goes out to the disco, he puts on a crucifix and a wishbone. He also wears what looks like a saint's medal and a cornicello, an Italian horn, which is supposed to ward off the evil eye. Now, one imagines that Tony's saint medal is his namesake, St. Anthony, to which Catholics pray when something is lost. Lost describes Tony pretty well. Tony may tease his mother for her religious piety, crossing herself at the mention of Frank Jr.'s name, or praying to God that Frank would call her more often, but clearly Tony is just as superstitious himself. Maybe he doesn't know what to believe in. Tony, in this movie, never articulates what he wants in life. Tony is the mirror opposite of Stephanie, who knows very clearly what she wants. She wants to lose her Brooklyn accent, save her money, move to Manhattan, take classes, and become as sophisticated as the other women in her office. Stephanie has goals, and she works toward them. She is willfully improving herself. Tony may keep company with two-dimensional celebrities in his bedroom, but Stephanie, if she's telling the truth, gets to meet celebrities in the flesh in her office. At no time does Tony talk about becoming a professional dancer. He does tell Stephanie that he sits by this bridge and daydreams. But this is not the Brooklyn Bridge, which leads to Manhattan. It's the Verrazano Bridge, which leads to Staten Island. If Tony sits and daydreams in front of this bridge, he must fantasize about moving to a nicer suburb, one that has a higher concentration of Italian Americans. There are plenty of young people in the world like Tony, whose greatest ambition is to just have a little more than their parents, to trade one suburb for a slightly better one. Now that we come to the bridge, let's talk about Bobby C. Oh, Bobby C. With any character, in any story, we have what we know about that character and what we know for sure about that character. In Tony Manero's gang, Bobby C is the runt. He's physically the smallest, even in heels, and his primary job appears to be driving the car. He is also the most vocally cynical. He tells his friends they'll never earn enough money to buy a nice car and that life is a rat race. One wonders if Bobby would be in this gang at all if he didn't own the car. Bobby's problem, so he says, is that he got his girlfriend Pauline pregnant. He wants her to have an abortion, but Bobby says his own family and the girl's family are pressuring him to marry her, which he evidently does not want to do. Bobby struggles with his situation until finally he joins his compadres on the Verrazano Bridge and he either falls by accident or jumps. It's a little hard to tell. Now that's what we know about Bobby, but it's not what we know for certain. Remember when the fellows first come into the disco at the start of the movie and Bobby asks, "Has anyone seen Pauline?" And the guys say no? Well, that's right. We never see Pauline either. We don't know for sure that she's pregnant. And if she's pregnant, we don't know for sure that Bobby is the father. We also don't know Pauline's ethnicity. Remember that when the boys first go to the disco, they engage in some vulgar and racist wordplay about having sex with a Hispanic or a African American woman. Perhaps Bobby's real dilemma is that he got a Hispanic or African American girl pregnant. We don't know. A third possibility is that there is no Pauline. Or, if there is, she is not pregnant and there is no pressure to marry her. Why is this a possibility? Well, for starters, talking about Pauline is the only way that Bobby gets the attention of people outside of his little group. He talks to Frank Jr. about it, although he really has to work to get Frank's attention, and he talks to Stephanie about it. Perhaps Bobby is so shy, so awkward, that he literally does not know how else to get someone's attention or engage with them in conversation. How about this? When the guys are gunning to attack the Barracudas, Bobby says, well, maybe we should wait until there are fewer of them. Then he tells Tony that he needs his help. Someone says, shut up. And Bobby tells Tony, I'm getting married. Is that really the time to make such an announcement? Maybe Bobby is just trying to get Tony's attention. Or, the real object of Bobby C's affection is not Pauline, but Tony. Bobby clearly looks up to Tony. He tearfully tells Tony how much he admires him for how together Tony is, if Bobby only knew. And just before Bobby falls or throws himself off the bridge, he does not say, I don't know what to do about Pauline, or I can't get married, I'm too young. He says to Tony, why didn't you call me? Bobby appears to be more brokenhearted about being ignored or rejected by Tony than anyone else. Now, we only know what the movie decides to show us or tell us. The genius of Saturday Night Fever is that it tells us and shows us only a little, and not knowing engages us with the story and the characters. Two more things. The big plot line here is that Tony is competing for a couple's dancing trophy at the disco and the big prize money. But Tony already has a dancing trophy. His brother Frank notices it in Tony's bedroom. It's a couple's trophy. And who was Tony's partner? Easy to miss, but it was Annette. When she and Tony are sitting together in the disco in front of the stripper, Annette says, hey, the disco is having the sweepstakes again, and we won last time, so let's do it again. But when we see Tony and Annette rehearse, Annette is not that great of a dancer. Her gestures are lazy, she doesn't seem to be really into it, even though, as she's told Tony, the prize money is bigger this time. Now, why is this important? Because if Tony won the dancing trophy at the disco with Annette as his partner, that should have tipped him off that the judges there are not good judges of dancing. Or that they just gave the trophy to Tony to keep him coming back to the club because everyone loves him there. Tony is good for business. Tony doesn't realize it, but the disco needs him more than he needs the disco. So, he wins, in quotes. He gives away the trophy and the prize money, and at the end, worn out and contrite, he goes to Stephanie's apartment in Manhattan. Once there, Tony says he wants to move to Manhattan like Stephanie, again, not to become a great dancer, but to get some kind of job. And he tells Stephanie, well, maybe we could see each other. Stephanie just wants to be Tony's friend. Now, if you look at Stephanie's wall, you may need a high-definition, really big TV screen. Look in the upper right-hand corner. she has a little wall hanging there with writing on it. Here's what it says: "Don't walk behind me, I may not lead. Don't walk in front of me, I may not follow. Just walk beside me and be my friend." That is a quote that, for some reason, is attributed to the writer Albert Camus, although there is no record that he ever said or wrote this. Doesn't matter. It expresses the final sentiment of the movie, and it is so appropriate because in dance, someone has to lead, and someone has to follow. But what Stephanie wants is for her and Tony to be friends. In other words, to stop their dance. The dance is over, so is the Saturday Night Fever, and so is the movie. Now, I didn't plan for this video to be this long, but if you've stuck with it, thank you for watching. I hope that you enjoyed Saturday Night Fever as much as I did. And if you noticed something interesting in the movie that I didn't talk about, or you want to weigh in on anything I've said, please leave a comment below. Thank you for watching.